Okay, so let me try that again. I tried recording this video just a few minutes ago and I forgot that I had my headset unplugged. So take two. Let's give this another try. So, regarding Sidney Watson versus Blaze Media, I was scanning for news stories on this, and one of the news stories I noticed was by Megan Fox of PJMedia. Now, usually there's no lack of news stories coming out from the major media organizations, but I usually don't pay attention to them because I find them invariably trash. But Megan Fox is a figure that that I've seen regularly on Rakita Law, and she has a great personality. She has one of the best laughs that you'll hear in sort of in the space that Rakita uh, occupies. She's a good person. Now I kind of read through her take on what's going on, and I I didn't really agree with her take, but I also know that she has pretty good reasons for having the position that she does. So the headline reads Sidney Watson's lawsuit against Blaze Media exposes misogyny on the right. Okay, Conservative Inc. seems to be coming apart at the seams lately. It's one big fight after the next. When Steven Crowder called out Big Con for writing contracts that appeared to take advantage of creators, everyone took cover or took a side. That noise went on for a while until Project Veritas kicked James O'Keefe out of the organization, alleging abusive behavior. We're still trying to figure that one out. Running in the background of all that was the story of how Eliza Blue worked her way into the inner circles of conservative entertainment and influencers with a dubious tale of being trafficked. When questioned, she became today's most notorious censor, striking YouTube channels and Twitter accounts that post publicly available photos and clips of her racy video vixen past. So just a side note, I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm not sure if Steven Crowder has anything to do with misogyny or whatever. I think that was more of a dispute about um, concerning the degree to which conservative media was willing to bend their knee to the rules of YouTube or other big tech companies, for example. Project Veritas, I understand that there were some accusations of inappropriate behavior, possibly. I haven't been paying too much attention to that story, but we all know that's a side thing, like, is it's distraction. If there are accusations of inappropriate behavior towards women, I'm pretty sure we all know that that's more of an excuse to push James O'Keefe out because of his criticisms towards Big Pharma, who is the biggest cash cow in the media space out there right now. So I understand there's heavy, heavy pressure on anyone that's, I guess, interested in money, which is everybody, to basically toe the line for Big Pharma and their allies. And I think that's the main story concerning James O'Keefe, not anything that has to do with women in the workspace. Now, Eliza Blue, that is, I don't know. Well, that's a tricky one, right? There's only a charge of misogyny only in relation to Eliza Blue herself and Shane Cashman's articles, the whole gang traffic or gang stalker theory thing. And like possibly that was more of a conspiracy theory thing. It wasn't really cast as a misogynistic thing so much, I don't think, but I get it. Now, the thing is, I mean, Shane Cashman's articles have been pulled by Timcast, and it is under review, and there is some backtracking going on because of the way that there's significant sort of defamation risk for Timcast for Shane having put out all that stuff without any facts to back it up, and a lot of sort of claims that were made. So anyway, let's set all that aside. So I guess in the end, I'm just sort of wondering. There is sort of turmoil in the conservative space, I guess, but I think it's a bit of a stretch to tie it all to misogyny, as a headline seems to suggest. But maybe we'll find out more. Let's go on. Now comes a huge lawsuit against Blaze Media, brought by talk show host Sidney Watson, who says that her time on the podcast You Are Here with Elijah Schaefer was a nightmare. Her lawyer is Town Hall's own Kurt Schlichter, another conservative media insider. In case you haven't noticed, there's an internal war going on inside the conservative media space, and maybe it's time to blow it up and start over. Another side note here, Kurt Schlichter is acting as the attorney for, he is representing Sydney in this. So I'm sure he had his recommendations, but in the end, at the end of the day, technically his voice is supposed to be Sydney's voice. So I don't think it's like two individuals sort of aligned together on a issue. It's more like, it is Sydney and her lawyer. To the extent that we're only talking about Sydney, it's not like a war. I mean, the fact that he's a conservative media insider is not terribly relevant. Um, I mean, he's just a lawyer representing his client, right? It doesn't really matter whether he's conservative or liberal. Theoretically, I mean, to the extent that he's doing his job well, whether he's liberal or conservative, he's going to represent Sydney the best way available to him. Okay, so then there's a little screenshot of Viva Frey's Twitter. So Crowder versus Daily Wire, Eliza Blue, Project Veritas expels James O'Keefe, Sidney Watson suing the Blaze. I've been in the space of the internet since 2018. I've never seen anything like this, let alone within a time span of 3 months. COINTELPRO 2.0. Okay, so Viva is bringing the feds into it. So is it a Fed campaign to sow discord in the conservative space by causing as much internal conflict as possible? Okay, that's a little bit conspiracy theory. I wouldn't put it past the feds. Um, but I mean, yeah, sure, it's possible. But I don't know. Like, what might be tying that together is just the fact of the Discord itself. I'm kind of curious how um, Megan is tying this back to misogyny. Well, let's find out. The details of Watson's claims say she was never informed she would be participating in a show that ended up focusing on gross sexual themes most of the time, with her, the only female on the set, just having to put up with it. She says her complaints to management went unheard and unanswered. The Blaze was founded by Glenn Beck, who tells people he is a devout Mormon. Yet, Watson says Schaefer would get drunk before filming and also offer alcohol to guests, who would then go on to berate women during the show, making Watson feel targeted and humiliated. All right, so I think this is a block quote. I, let's see. Ms. Watson complained of the misconduct continually from December 2021 to August 2022. to various personnel at the Blaze, including but not limited to the Blaze CEO Tyler Carden. Mr. Carden and the Blaze did nothing to address the grievous conduct, totally abdicating both their legal responsibility to Miss Watson and their moral responsibilities to Miss Watson, and as well as the Blaze's own loyal audience, to the point that CEO Tyler Carden, who should have protected Miss Watson's rights and the integrity of the program, asked Miss Watson to get Mr. Schaefer to stop talking about Dick so much on the show. Okay, so that was a quote directly from the filing of the complaint. Couple of, like, I've already done a live reading of this. Couple of observations about that, right? Really have to take that with a grain of salt. First of all, uh, Sidney is complaining that Tyler Carden, she said that Tyler Carden tried to get Miss Watson to get Elijah to stop talking about Dick so much, right? Uh, Number one, that doesn't really make sense. Like, in what context was that said? Was it just like, just conversational thing? Because it wouldn't make sense. That's a primary action of remedy that Tyler Carden was taking for any whatever thing that Elijah did. If that was actually the intent, we don't actually have the context surrounding those words, so we don't know, right? But let's pretend for a second there that uh, Tyler Carden was convinced by Sidney Watson that Elijah was talking about inappropriate things. He checked it out, and he actually did believe that Elijah was talking about dicks too much. Now, why would Tyler go through Sidney? Why would he tell Sidney to tell Elijah to do this? He would already know that the relationship between Elijah and Sidney is already strained at this point. And is it going to come across well for Sidney to tell Elijah that? Like, if he wanted, if I was a CEO, if I was Tyler, I would have been talking to Elijah directly. And I think like the following section actually mentions that, and like further on in the complaint document that Sidney actually told him to talk to Elijah directly, but it didn't work or whatever. I mean, but if he did talk to him directly, I mean, what more is he supposed to do? Especially after he fired Elijah from the show. Like, as a company, what more action were they supposed to take? Um, they were like supposedly they abdicated their legal responsibilities and whatever the moral responsibilities are in the context of this legal complaint. But okay. um, and of course this is all sort of Sydney's characterization of whatever words are spoken, right, or whatever acts that took place as well. So do take that with a grain of salt. Sydney's characterizations are not up and up. So elsewhere in the complaint, there is a mention of like some dude, some conservative dude, basically. Here's what happened. So Elijah made a tweet about Ukraine, I believe, and said some comment about the leader. I forget his name for them. I can't remember his name right now for whatever reason, which is amazing. But yeah. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Like this conservative guy responded, um, uh, well, basically by pointing out um, how Elijah didn't speak up when Jack Murphy was cursing out Sydney live on their show, right? And then basically what Elijah did was just kind of snap back at him saying, uh basically saying like, "Oh yeah, it's like I'm sure Sydney would sleep with you or whatever." Like he was saying it in a sarcastic way, as in like, "Look, you're being ridiculous. You're being such a simp." Like as if like you know being white knighting so hard is going to get other women to sleep with you that you're white knighting for, that kind of thing. It was a dig at the guy. It wasn't a dig at Sydney. But what Sydney did was take those words literally. Um, I don't think anybody could have taken those words literally, like reasonably. It was basically she consciously stripped out the sarcastic context of it, took the words literally, and basically made it sound like Elijah actually thought that Sydney might sleep with him, which is completely ridiculous, and it is disingenuous. So to me, something like that puts the rest of the criminal complaint or whatever, this um, legal complaint, um, it puts the rest of it under question. You kind of have to take it with a big grain of salt. So that's the context. Anyway, so let's continue on. If you want to read the details in the suit, and there's a lot, and there are lots more beyond this, you can check out Red State's coverage. I mean, that's fine. And on at the bottom of Red State, there is actually like the criminal complaint referenced as well. But why not just go right to the article itself? Better yet, why can't I would have liked to see Megan go through the criminal complaint document and go into the details. But I get it. That's not the type of article this was supposed to be for. This was supposed to be for something that caught her eye as far as what's going on in the conservative media space. So let's see what she's observing him. I'm more interested in what this reveals about right wing media. Something ugly is going on in some right wing entertainment spaces that I've witnessed and been a target of myself. I call it clubhouse syndrome. No girls allowed is basically nailed to the door, and if you're allowed, you'd better be prepared to listen to anti female rhetoric and not push back against it. If you do try to defend the women who are not lying harpies, because there are many of us, there's only one response you can expect, and it won't be civil. I've been on the receiving end of this kind of abuse very publicly for trying to have a rational discussion about men and women. It's not fun, but there is a subset of our side that thinks it's hilarious and acceptable to treat women this way. Okay, so I don't know if Megan goes into this, but I do need to provide some context to this. If you guys have been watching Rakita Law, you know what this is about, right? So Rakita had a birthday stream where a bunch of people got together and they were talking about men and women and dating. And uh, like I think one of the things that Megan tried to comment was Megan was on the show and she said, something to the effect of like, um, like when people were talking about how like there's just Tinder and stuff is just such a cesspool. She was saying, look, why don't people just go out to places like I think she mentioned a bookstore. Like why don't people just go to like real life, real world places to meet people? And there was a lot of like pushback from other people saying, it's like, oh well, that's I mean, first of all, there nobody's doing that. Second, people who are like just hanging out in bookstores, willing to entertain, um, men approaching them, are probably not, um, they're not probably open to that in the first place. I mean, there's like a real danger of being accused of being accused of harassment and stuff like that. And second, like if they are, maybe they're, it's just, is that the kind of person that you would want to speak to in the first place? So there was some of that. I mean, most of it was light banter. What happened though was um, Uncivil Law, Kurt, another guest that was on at the time. I think he was going through some dark times, and he has had some pretty frustrating experiences in the past. And I think he might have misunderstood what Megan was saying. He came in hard. He came in hot. Very sort of upset, aggressive, saying basically like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Um, like his face was like, you know, uh, you try to talk to women, you get shot down over and over and over, and after a while, you just get so sick of it and depressed and all that stuff. He was like not in a good space, I guess. So basically, his take was like, look, uh, he took offense and he thought that she was being condescending in some way. I mean, I don't think she was, but he kind of took it that way and said, "Look, you can't just tell us a pithy response like that uh, to make it sound like we're doing something. We're just being losers, and we should go out and talk to women in bookstores and." Um, that's actually some kind of pathway forward. I think everybody else agreed that no, that's not actually the path forward. That's never going to work. But I think other people were sort of being more jovial about it. But I think Kurt was in a space where he was just taking it super seriously. Um, and um, yeah, it got a little bit awkward. Um, now, Uh, I believe he apologized for it after. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that. Maybe I take that back. He might have, he might not have. I'm not sure. I know immediately the day before he was like, "No, well, that's what I thought," and um uh basically he said it as it is, but maybe he apologized for it after. Like further, like later than that? I'm not sure. But whatever happened, that's what happened. And I think that's what Megan's referencing here, where she feels that there was a clubhouse syndrome when she was targeted. There is a related, not like thinly related event as well, where uh, it was another live stream. I think it was Fair and Balanced live stream. Her sister was on, Bronca was on, and there's probably some kind of a misunderstanding, and Fair and Balanced's sister and Bronca, uh, they had quite a bit of a dispute. Like Bronca went after Farron's sister hard. He thought that she was, insinuating that I don't know what the fuck it was. Like I don't even want to get into all that, but basically the topic was um women and men um and basically dating and marriage after a certain age and all that stuff. And it's like Bronca's take was that, it's if you're a guy and if you're a guy and at a certain age, and if you're in a good place, like financially, you got more or less got your stuff together, like why would you possibly date an older woman when you could be dating a younger woman, like in their 20s, who are still fertile, who haven't had um, a high body count, basically, and all that stuff. So that might come into it as well, but um, basically, there is a little bit of a lens tinting going on as far as how Megan's perceiving this thing. And I fully understand how she got there because of the experiences she had, um, that I've seen, but maybe it's not 100% accurate for the rest of us who haven't gone through the things that she has gone and we were watching from the outside. So, continuing on, referenced in Watson's lawsuit is this disgusting display of unhinged anger directed at her for doing her job by grifter Jack Murphy, who was a king of the manosphere until his moment unmasked him for the fraud he was. Schaefer did nothing to stop his guests from abusing his co-host. Okay, so one quick comment. Number one, Jack Murphy is not. I mean, we're gonna put the words "King of Manosphere" in heavy quotes because not really. I mean, are you really the King of Manosphere if you've had um like if you had sort of like a cuckold fetish past and have made videos on the OnlyFans and stuff like that? Like, I don't know. Like that was a whole reason why Jack Murphy was being criticized heavily and why Jack Murphy blew up in the first place because he got frustrated at being found out or whatever, right? For being unmasked, so to speak. Second, Schaefer did nothing to stop his guest from abusing his co-host. Look, if Sidney was a guy, if Sidney was another guy, nobody would say anything about how Elijah was acted, which was basically to let Sidney handle Jack Murphy, which she did fine. And it actually, in my mind, in my opinion, it actually ended up better because Sidney was able to handle Jack Murphy without having Elijah White Knight jump into the situation. And it actually, like Sydney, was actually a catalyst by, by the fact that she handled it herself. She was actually the pivot point for Jack Murphy completely discrediting himself. Like, people would not have gone that hard against Jack Murphy if Elijah jumped in and prevented everything from happening further or whatever. It was a fact that Sydney stood her ground and she handled herself at the time. That made Jack Murphy's actions that much more under the lens of scrutiny, right? So I thought it was a good situation, uh, like a good outcome. It wasn't a good situation. Like, I take that back. Like, Jack Murphy was completely horrible to Sydney, and I've said so in a number of comment threads and stuff. Um, Completely horrible. But the way that Sydney handled it was she handled it herself. Elijah didn't have to jump in to try to rescue her or anything, and it was good in the end. So, okay, so here's a screenshot of a tweet. Superman, if he wasn't scared of green rocks, no green rocks. WTF Jack Murphy Live. I know I'm risking a block. I don't give a F. I stick up for you all the time. You know that. But I saw this clip and I was astonished by your lack of composure. How am I going to say, yeah, this guy is a real man after this? Have you even apologized to Sidney Watson? Okay, so that was something directed at Jack Murphy. And
Because Mr. Dukenball said,
yeah, there's
Could
a
you
clip.
please clear up the cuck article you wrote?
I am not going to talk about
Again?
this.
Okay.
And basically, you know what? Fuck you
Me?
for bringing this up right here and right now.
Me?
Why are you doing this to me?
I didn't know that. I didn't know what it was.
Well, just use a little bit of fucking common sense.
Sorry, apologies.
Yeah. Fuck you.
Elizabeth.
Heartfelt.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I mean that was fine. Sydney basically said like I didn't know what it was. Like she defended it. Jack Murphy went on a fucking rant on his own and he ended up discrediting himself. Sydney basically gave him the rope to hang himself with, and that was fine. That was a good outcome. Elijah didn't need to swoop in like some Superman or whatever. Like that doesn't even make sense. Um, it lets Sydney be a strong woman, be a strong woman. Again, if Sydney was another guy, if that was like Tim Pool or something, like look how ridiculous it would have been. Like if Elijah would have tried to step in and try to rescue the person or whatever, right? It's strong people handling themselves. I thought that's what it was at the time, and that's what most people thought it was at the time. Anyway, continue on. And of course, the moment a conservative woman says, I think this is what we call misogyny, the whole crowd boos and throws things because the word is synonymous with feminists we despise. But feminists can be wrong about almost everything and still have a point now and then. And treating women with disdain and contempt based on gender is a definition of misogyny, and it is happening on my side more than some of us want to admit. Who is she talking about here? Is it Jack Murphy? If it is, here's the thing. If that was Elijah reading out the tweet, Jack Murphy would have said exactly the same thing. Um, the fact that he was an asshole did not change by the fact that Sidney was a woman and not a man, right? Okay, so what are we talking about here? So I think this is what we call misogyny. Like, what are we talking about? Like, in relation to what's just been offered. So let's see if we can clarify any further. Let's go on. There is an excellent argument to be made by that left-wing culture has brought us to a point where men and women can no longer talk to one another without contempt. Obviously, anti-male sentiment is deep and vast on the left, which is also wrong. I've written a book about how wrong it is to give women credibility they don't deserve simply because they have uteruses. Many of us women on the right have defended men vociferously when they have been falsely accused. Instead of thanks and appreciation, however, these men on the right lump us into the same category as the feminists they hate and the women they have spurned them or taken them for everything they have in divorce court. Okay, so what are we talking about? I don't think anybody's really doing that. Like, I don't think anybody's sitting down and saying, "Oh, look what Amber Heard is doing." Megan, despite what you're saying on the contrary, despite all the actions that you've done to help men that have been unjustly accused or whatever, you're exactly the same. Nobody's said that to Megan. What what has been happening is that uh, you know guys when talking about most women and how most women are these days and to to the credit of the women, like not it's not that it's not their fault, and like this has been repeated over and over. It's not They're not 100% to blame. It's a media, it's all these people in power, it's universities, it's all these people in positions of influence convincing women that they need to be a certain way or they're fine if they're this and that, and they've they've almost been basically groomed into having these attitudes that um, end up having them self-sabotage kind of thing. So there's been a lot of generalizations and generalized talk that have been said about women in general in modern times, but of course, this is where a lot of people fail. Generalizations are generalizations. Generalizations are not universals. Uh, Branca, especially, is constantly having to remind people of this. It's like, I'm not talking about all women. I'm not talking about, I'm just talking in general based on statistics or whatever. that kind of thing, right? So um, let's be careful here. Anyway, I get it. Some women suck, but instead of seeing that each person is an individual worthy of being measured by his or her own actions and contributions to the movement, many conservative entertainments have brought into the or bought into the left obsession of pitting people into identity groups, and their favorite identity group is to bash is women. I I don't think that is so. I don't know. Like it's like again, generalizations are generalizations, right? Uh, Megan is concerned that people are taking generalizations and mistaking them for universals and saying that everyone is that way and no individual is worthy of concern. That's not how it is. Look, when you're trying to make a cultural decision or a policy decision at like a societal level, you have to look at the big picture. You have to look at the bell curve. You're taking a look at the fattest portion of the bell curve and basically talking about that. And, of course, there are the outliers. There's people on both ends of the spectrum that fall outside of the common analysis. But you can't put out a disclaimer every single time you talk about a thing, right? We generalize because generalizations are useful. It gets us talking about what we need to talk about quickly and that affect the most number of people statistically. So that's what's going on. I don't think like Megan is confused or Megan is accusing people of mistaking generalize or universalizing instead of generalizing. But I think it's Megan herself that might be universalizing um, about these men than generalizing. Um, but maybe I don't know. Maybe this is a generalization. Actually, yeah, it would make sense if she is generalizing. So maybe she is saying like, look, most men, there are some women, of course, that are treating people as individuals, but a lot of men in this space are universalizing when they should be generalizing. Okay, I guess. I mean, that's possible, but I don't know. I don't think. I think even that's a stretch. I think it's a stretch that most people are doing that. Anyway, continuing on, Schaefer and other entertainers like him on the right continually bring idiots like Nick Fuentes, a man whose name I've never put in print and never will again after today, to demean conservatism through blatant misogyny and other nonsense. Why do they do this? It is not amusing to make a guy famous who thinks that having children only counts if he can have male hair, and who says that women should be treated according to brutal Taliban standards? Is this really the message you want your daughter to hear, conservatives? Is this who we are? The irony is not lost on me that this Ethan Edwards person thinks Fuentes actually gained any points here. Okay, so first of all, Nick Fuentes is a white identitarian, I believe. And I get, Megan, that you don't like his views, and I don't think most people do. Uh, but like, what do you are we supposed to take it that most people are like Nick Fuentes? Like, is Nick like Nick Fuentes? Like, is Rakita like Nick Fuentes? I'll just call him NF, Nick Fuentes. Like, is Andrew like that? Whether it's Legal Mind or Legal Bites, not Legal Bites. Oh shit, Legal Mindset. Uh, Legal Minds might be like that. Legal Mindset or Bronca or I don't know. Tug, Camelot. Like, are most men in the circles that we pay attention to, are they like NF? I don't think so, right? Um, anyway, also, I'm not. that familiar with Nick Fuentes and what he believes, so I can't say whether like the blatant misogyny and this Taliban thing is true. Uh, it sounds so ridiculous that it's hard to believe, but maybe it is true. But I would like to, I'll withhold my judgment until I actually look into Nick Fuentes. Right, Ethan Edwards, screenshot of a tweet. Nick Fuentes dunked on Sydney L. Watson so hard she's still seething about his iconic, well, I'm having an experience with a woman right now. Elijah Schaefer having Nick on was the turning point. Elijah was right. They never stop coming after you if platform Nick.
Do you
Okay, let's
respect
see
women,
what he's saying.
Of course.
but you just don't want them to have any rights?
Well, I didn't say that. I didn't
Okay,
say they shouldn't have rights.
but if I'm understanding your question correctly, if you don't want them to vote or drive or have an existence akin to what they would have in, say, Saudi Arabia, you would say that in large part, then they don't really have rights.
Well, I would say probably the ideal is something more like Afghanistan, if I'm being totally honest. Like
And
recent,
so what's the difference
recent
between
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan then and Saudi Arabia?
Like the brutality, I guess it's like a little slightly more brutal. Of course, Taliban rule, not American rule. I'm talking about recent
So
Afghanistan.
you want women to have the same treatment as women have under Taliban rule in Afghanistan?
Something approximating that,
Okay.
yeah.
You also promote like the way of interacting with women, and I go, have you been in a relationship with a woman?
No.
So how are you telling other people how to behave towards women when you yourself have not had any actual physical, interaction with them in a romantic capacity, or in fact in any capacity where you uphold them in a way that treats them with respect? I mean, if you're out here arguing that women are basically half the value of, no, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, in fact, because that's not right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are looking to some other regimes around the world that do think that women are half the value of a man, I have to question what kind of a person who's had no experience with women is in a position to basically promote these ideas.
Well, I'm having an experience with a woman right now.
Do you respect?
All right, so okay. So far, like, what am I supposed to take from that? Like, one of the major problems with Nick Fuentes, from what I could tell from that clip, is that you never know when he's being serious, right? The whole time he's just kind of joking or obfuscating. I can't even say the word. Um, basically, sort of, he's not being forthright. Whatever he actually thinks, he's sort of holding on to it. But let's say we take at face value what he's saying. So he said something like the right that he does wants to withhold from women is the right to vote, I believe. And then the rest of it, I'm not sure. Something like the Taliban, but I don't know what he means by that, in what respect. Like, more, there's a lot of characterization by Sidney that, uh, I would have rather heard Nick explain himself than him not offering it and Sydney having to sort of guess what he means. So, very frustrating all around. Um, but you know, I don't know what I don't know what conclusion I'm supposed to draw here. First of all, like there's the thing where it's like, uh, the thing is, a lot of people have guests on like this to let them speak what they want to speak, and then let you decide, make your own judgments about uh, whether you agree or disagree, right? I mean, the media has been doing this all the time. They would invite people that they know that they disagree with, just let them speak, and often it'd be more like, well, just give them more rope to hang themselves with, kind of thing. So I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know what it is that we're supposed to do. Anyway, so Continuing on, notably, Watson points to YH's December 3 episode featuring Notorious Bigot. Nick Fuentes as evidence of the increasingly hostile work environment. Again, I don't see that as a hostile work environment. I see it as let's invite this guy on and then let's challenge him and then let's make the audience decide what they want to decide. He was grossly misogynistic, and most troubling was how this appeared to be condoned by Mr. Schaefer, Watson says of Fuentes. Okay, appeared? Did he? Anyway, conservatives have allowed this cultural poison that started on the left to infect our own spaces. We have bought into it uh, and now believe that we hate one another and that each sex is out to destroy the other one. There is no room for debate. The science is settled on the right. Women are the devil. This is no different than the anti male sentiment on the left that we all agree is evil. Okay, that's a little too much, Megan. Like we don't the the right doesn't think that. The right doesn't think women are the devil. You're basically taking the opinions of few people, basically interpreting it under your own lens and then casting the net to the rest of the conservative space. Um, Basically saying men are like this, like most men are like this. Most conservative men are not like Nick Fuentes. All right. All right. So both sides are deeply wrong. Instead of trying to come to a rational balance on the right, where we recognize that some women and some men are dangerous and evil, but others aren't, we've allowed the left to turn us into what they say we are. And the women on the right are forced to either agree with blatant misogyny or at least put up with it to have a say in the conversation and a seat at the table, or face ridicule and humiliation. Already I'm hearing whisperings of who would ever want to hire a woman as a co-host after this in response to Watson's lawsuit. Well, here's a problem, Megan. Number one, you didn't do a deep dive into the legal complaint, right? So, what data do you have to back yourself if you're saying it's not true who would ever want to hire a woman as a co host after this? That view is supported by something, and that something has to be at least in part related to the criminal complaint and the details that are contained within. If you don't go over the details and you don't address it, how are you making this judgment right off the bat? And to a great extent, I would actually agree with that sentiment. Who would ever want to hire a woman as a co-host after this? Well, actually, no. I I take it back. I don't agree with that sentiment. I would definitely agree with the sentiment. Who would ever want to hire Sidney Watson as a co-host after this? So, in that sense, yeah, you don't need to check into any details, I guess, in order to differentiate between individuals and entire class of people. So maybe I take it back. All right. But it is definitely true. Like, who would ever want to hire Sidney Watson as a co-host after this? So going over, like I already did a live stream on the contents of the legal complaint, but going through the legal complaint, um, th- there's a definite path of interpretation where the talent, according to the contract, is Elijah Schaefer. The co-host is Sidney Watson, and um, Sidney Watson was lining up guests, or Elijah was lining up guests. Sydney did not agree. She said that they were basically misogynist and that she was being set up to be a punching bag. Those were her words, which is highly conspiratorial, by the way. It seems ridiculous. Like, why would you think that? If you had like Nick Fuentes on like 20 times in a row, maybe it's just to let him speak and, like I said, let him expose himself and give him more rope to hang himself with. Like, why why would you just take it at a face value that it was meant to be something against Sidney, right? That seems ridiculous. Anyway, right. So, I mean, there is a interpretation of the legal complaint where, like, I kind of this kind of surfaced to me as I was reading it. It's like, look, Elijah's a Elijah's a talent. Uh, Sydney is a co-host. Like these are like the actual words that are used in the contract, right? And I mean, maybe they meant by talent, they meant both Sydney and Elijah, and the co-host would be some other co-host, but I don't know of any other co-hosts in You Are Here podcast. Those two are the only hosts. So what co-hosts are they talking about, right? It was just those two as a host and the guests. So when I'm reading through the contract and I see the terminology referring to the talent, singular, and the co-host, singular, I kind of have to assume that one's one and the other one's the other. And, considering the prominence that Elijah had at the time, I can only assume that Elijah was the talent and Sydney was a co-host. And here's the thing, like Elijah was lining up guests, Sidney didn't approve, so Elijah basically withdrew himself from the process and left it up to Sidney to pick the guests. And then Sidney's response to that, as outlined in the legal complaint, was, "Oh, this is an additional strain for me. This is too much work." Right? He left me with all the work of lining up the guests, saying that she said that Elijah said that Sidney would just veto all the guests that he picked anyway. And maybe things have gotten to that point at that stage, right? Um, I think those two are having significant disagreements, and I can actually see it deteriorating to that point. Not because any one party is being evil or anything, but just the fact that they're having a disagreement, right? That they're not seeing eye to eye on things, and it would actually devolve to that state. But it's like what Sydney was um, upset was she wanted Blaze to do something about it, and she wanted Blaze to keep her on the show, which leads me to believe it's like, okay, so basically she is going to Blaze and accusing Elijah of all these things and very highly like damaging things like um, um, misconduct in relation to sort of sexual nature and this and that, harassment. So she's going after Elijah, and at the same time, she expected to remain in the Blaze and on the show. I can only conclude that she was eyeballing being the replacement talent, the talent, and she would keep the show, and it would be her show, and Elijah would be out. In that context, who would ever want to hire Sydney as a co-host? Um, Not who would ever want to hire a woman. That's wrong, right? That's casting the net too far because Sydney does not represent all women. Sydney is Sydney. And in that context, I would highly, recommend caution for Jeremy of the quartering, by the way, because he is sort of setting up to have her as a co-host, and the track record is sort of raising some red flags here. But anyway, there's already a shocking lack of women in conservative entertainment spaces next to Laura Ingraham and Candace Owens, which other Prominent females, can you name whose faces you see regularly all over conservative media? Even Ann Coulter is mostly absent these days. Who has the biggest presence? Tim Pool, Steven Crowder, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, and no slight on any of them. I enjoy most of them. The point is, women on the right are damn near invisible, even though there are many of us out here doing a whole lot of support work on this movement. Oh, come on. Let's be a little bit more honest here, right? What other women are in the conservative space? Like, all right, like besides Laura Ingraham and Candace Owens, the criminal complaint itself names a couple of them, like Tommy Lauren being one of them. Now, in the independent space, like because she includes Tim Pool and Steven Crowder and Matt Walsh. Well, maybe not Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro and the rest because that's I don't know. Arguably, Daily Wire is not really independent anymore. They're too big for that. In the independent media, there's a lot of there's Lauren Chen. There is Lauren Southern who took a break, but she is doing a lot more stuff now. There are other women in the conservative space that regularly guest for those two, right? Um, and like even in sort of like the legal space, I mean, Megan Fox herself is has picked up quite a bit of viewership through um, Nick's channel and other people. Uh, in Friday Night Tights space is filled with women, right? Um, it's even Brittany Venti's sort of come into prominence just now because of the whole Eliza Blue thing blew up. There's always been like that Star Wars girl. There was always been Chrissy Mayer. Um, there's been I don't know. I don't know how you can say that there's shocking lack of women in conservative entertainment spaces. Now, those women are not, explicitly conservative, but they're in this conservative culture, right? Anyway, we're writing about these men's documentaries and pushing their shows and helping spread their messages. And what do we get in return? Ignored if we're lucky and shamed and humiliated if we aren't. Just writing this opens me up to ridicule and shunning, but I'm 20 years in and I've lost my ability to care. What's happening here is wrong. For the sake of my daughters, I will not shut up about it, and I will not support any movement that fails to say women should be treated with respect in the workplace, and that doesn't include subjecting them to drunken, hostile hosts and guests. I don't know what to tell you, Megan. Like, women are strong in the conservative space, um, and they have been. Women are also strong in the center space, right? Um, I'm just even thinking of even left, like I'm thinking of Jimmy Dore. Um, he has regular female guests in all the time. I'm also thinking of someone who I've been listening to recently while driving, just podcasts. Megan Kelly. She's been very active in the center space. Center left, center right. It's arguable where she is too, or whatever. But come on, let's not miscast things, right? Okay, I wonder if Steven Crowder knew about this before he came out to tell us about the bad contracts and conservative media that were hurting young and up and comers. It sounds like a whole lot of people knew what Schaefer was like and said nothing for a very long time. He was eventually let go of Blaze Media for another incident with another woman who says he groped her while he was drunk. Megan, you can't go around just assuming that Elijah was in the wrong. Look, if you want to be treated fairly individually, you need to individually treat other people fairly individually. This is not doing justice to anything concerning Elijah um, and Sidney for that matter. Right off the bat in the beginning of the article, you told us that you're not interested in looking into the details of the criminal complaint in this article. Like you haven't done it, so why are you talking about it as if you have? Why are you talking about it as if you have looked into the facts already? It's already only at the criminal complaint stage. We haven't seen any evidence. I mean, I hope to God that this thing goes to trial because in the complaint itself, Sidney asks for a trial by jury and is asking um, for it to be looked at in the courts with full evidence, right? I would hope to God that it goes to that stage because I'm dying to know. I'm dying to find out what's going on. I'm dying to see what evidence that Sydney has. Maybe she'll be right, or maybe she'll just crash and burn like Amber Heard did. I don't know which way it's going to go, but I'm really curious which way it will be. It will turn out to be. Okay, continuing on. A shakeup is happening, and I'm glad because this sickness will destroy all of us. If the right wants to lose some of the strongest allies, i.e., women who agree with them politically, keep it up. I'd rather quit and spend the rest of my life gardening than defend this kind of disgusting chauvinism. Good luck being a movement supported only by angry men. The conservative media needs women. Do they know that? It doesn't seem like it. Though they sure want us when it's time to vote, don't they? If those controlling the conservative entertainment and social media space come out in favor of Schaefer and Blaze Media, they will predictably turn Watson into a caricature of herself. They will call her woke or feminist or some other slur. Here's Ali Alexander, a MAGA influencer with over 100K followers, calling her lawsuit whorish. That's just earned him an unfollow from me, by the way. Ali Alexander, Sidney Watson, who suit is frivolous, poorly written, and a whorish attempt add economic value to her career when there is none. She should sue her father. Thread, get Mr. Schaefer to stop talking about Dick so much. Sidney Watson suing Blaze, blah, 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 blah. Okay, who the hell is Ali Alexander and why should I care? Why should I take him as an example of what's occurring in the most of the male space, right? Like, Megan, why do you do that? Why do you take an outlier and make him the representative of the main cross section of the conservative male space and then just assume that if anybody calls out um, Sydney and her legal complaint without you having gone through the details of the criminal complaint or legal complaint itself, explaining why it's legit and what evidence is there, and really there is no evidence there really. What's there is thin. I imagine that what evidence there is would come out in the trial and not the criminal complaint. And uh, the claims that are being made are sort of clashing with each other. There are some real red flags, and you haven't gone through the work of going through the document. So you can't say that there is something really legitimate with this legal complaint, and that if anybody speaks against it or finds fault in it, that they're being misogynist. You haven't done the work. Do the work. So far, the big names have remained rather quiet about the lawsuit. Perhaps they're waiting to see which way the wind will blow. Tim Pool did address it, and one of his guests alleged that he saw Schaefer very drunk during a taping of the show. Chris Bertman. So a screenshot of another tweet. Timcast and IRL crew discussed Sidney Watson's lawsuit against the Blaze regarding alleged abuse from former co-host Elijah Schaefer. Phil, that remains, who previously appeared on You Are Here, corroborated Watson's claim on Schaefer drinking on set. Okay, he drank on set. So does Nick Rekieta. You've guested on Nick Rekieta's show all the time. So what are you talking about? Are you gonna put Nick under the bus for drinking? Um. Anyway, whatever. Speaking of Tim Pool, the only woman I can name that he made popular is Eliza Blue, an empty vapid grifter without uh, a solid history in conservatism. And what do the men of Conservative Inc. do to hard-hitting female journalists who get stories and make waves? They destroy them. If you want proof of this, and you have 3 hours, listen to Lauren Southern's expose on what she calls a dissident right. I sadly didn't watch it until last night, and it rocked my world. I know she's telling the truth because I've seen it myself, and it makes me sick to think that I used to push profiles of these frauds who are fooling everyone. I've got my own story about Milo that I'll save for another day, but I have personal knowledge that he is not who he pretends to be. Okay, so look, this is getting more and more kind of spun away. It's like as if Megan's putting out a spin and she's starting to believe her own spin as she goes along in her own sort of emotional take on things, without having looked into the facts of all the things that she's mentioning. Speaking of Tim Pool, the only woman I can name that he made popular. Okay, well, that just tells me that you don't watch Tim Pool, right? Like, do you? Listen, there are a lot of women who came on Tim Pool's show, and they've gotten a lot of subs and clicks and views because they were on Tim Pool. There are people that are, I mean, look at Cassandra McDonald or Cassandra Fairbanks. She was on the guest several times, so she became sort of well known because of that. And then uh, she actually became part of Timcast, and she became the producer of Timcast. And basically, a lot of people know Cassandra at this point. And there's been other. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. Let's go on. Conservative Inc. has a lot to answer for. It's full of people who care more about their own fame and notoriety than they do about conservative values. And the fact that it's coming apart is a good thing. Burn it down, start over. What we really need is authenticity and principles, not outrage takes for clicks and fame. Our country is burning and West is falling, and Con Inc. is protecting moneymakers over values. Well done. Cue sarcastic clapping. What are you talking about? Look, the reason why Sidney is going after Blaze is because Elijah doesn't have money to give her if he sues him, right? What are you talking about? Authenticity and principles, not protecting moneymakers over value? Look, Sidney is going after cash. That is a primary aim of this legal complaint. The legal complaint asks for compensatory damages for a career that she projected for herself through Blaze Media of getting her millions of dollars. So she's seeking compensation. She's also seeking punitive damages, and she's seeking legal fees, right? And punitive damages by saying that because of Elijah's actions and because lack of enough action by Blaze Media that they've somehow violated the Texas Human Rights Code or some bullshit like that. If you've gone through the legal complaint, Megan, you'll see it for what it is, a money grab. Maybe there is a legitimate concern there that started this thing, but in the end, that's not what it ended up being about. Not purely. In the end, it ended up being all about money. Just read the thing. And it's really frustrating when people react emotionally like this to an like just the level of irony. Like it's an article complaining that people are not treating other people as individuals while she is treating an entire segment of the conservative media as just blanket something that needs to be burned down and started over because they're skipping authenticity and principles and doing it all for money over values. Come on. Continue on. I'm tired of it. Blacklist me. I don't care. It wouldn't be much different than it is now. My 20-year experience in this movement has taught me that my value isn't based on the stories I break or the philosophical contributions I make. It's based on the worth of the popular guys in the clubhouse give me, and that's next to nothing. I'm looking forward to Watson's case playing out in court, and I doubt very much that Schlichter would have taken it on if it wasn't a strong one, contrary to the denials of the naysayers who want to point and laugh at the whiny woman who can't take a joke. I hope it brings some much needed sanity back to the right so we can get back to fighting the left instead of each other. Look, Megan, I don't know like, I don't know who you're talking about when you're saying, it's like the popular guys in the clubhouse. Um, I really don't know who you're talking about because uh, most of the guys that I've seen you clash with, even mildly, they're not the people that are bringing you fame, right? The only one that I can possibly think of with enough sort of click power is Nick. And Nick has treated you with nothing but respect. Are you saying that? Are you seriously referring to him as the popular guy in the clubhouse and that he gave you next to nothing? I really hope not. I'm hoping that you had somebody else in mind, right? And of course, Schlichter is going to take a case because he's a lawyer. He takes on cases for his clients. He wouldn't have taken it if it wasn't a strong one. There's a difference between a case being strong and a case being likely to succeed in a settlement payout or winning in a trial of in a jury trial, right? You Or, like it could give you some clout in some other way. Do you really think that Binger took on case against Kyle because it was such a strong case? Like let's put on some common sense hats here and not make blanket statements like that. Editor's note: join PJ Media VP to support our conservative reporting, fight big tech, and get exclusive access. Are you fighting big tech really? Are you? Well, maybe you are. We didn't really talk about it in this article, but and you're conservative media, I guess. I don't know. But listen, if this is a kind of quality of work that you're putting out, I think I think we need an I think you need a follow up. I think you need to read the uh, legal complaint. I think you need to dig into the facts a little bit, uh, or maybe just wait until the trial if it happens, like you said. But this is not the way to make a generalization about the conservative space by purposely avoiding to take a look at the details of the criminal or legal complaint, and by purposely uh, picking. I mean, come on, look at the examples that you picked: Ali and Alexander, Nick Fuentes. Like, how far how far, like Jack Murphy, how far to the bottom of the barrel did you have to reach to come up with representatives for the conservative space? So, um, I don't know, but I know you're capable of being um, fact-based and fair. Um, so before I make any judgments about you in general, I'm only gonna make judgments about this specific article. And I think it's not like if I was to rate it, I would give it maybe 2 out of 5. Right? I think you've I think you can and have put out better work. So I'm not gonna I'm gonna hold judgment on you as a person and on your journalistic ability because I think it's better than what I don't think this is your best example, but um, but maybe maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is something that um, you hold as one of your better work. I don't know, but I guess time will tell. And um, I would like to see what you have to say about it in podcasts and articles going forward. So that's my take on it. So Sidney Watson's lawsuit against Blaze Media exposes misogyny on the right by Megan Fox, 4:58 p.m. on February 12, 2023. And that's my take on that.